Good morning. Oh my God. Good morning. It was really quite something following the governor of Arkansas. If you guys don't wake up, I'm going to make you call the hogs. And don't think I won't do it. There's a lot of people that know that. This is a comfortable position. It's wonderful to see what FreightWaves has been able to accomplish, and what is being shown here at the Future Supply Chain is really remarkable. So I'm here with Andrew this morning. I've had the opportunity in the time that I was at FreightWaves to spend fireside chats with a number of the leaders, the innovators in our industry, and I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to spend this time with Andrew. So Andrew, welcome, and it's great to have you. I'm going to do a little bit more background before Andrew talks. Most of you probably know the Andrew Leto name, but let me do a short summary. Andrew started Global Trans and sold it. It's now the fourth largest, Worldwide Express and it coming together. It's the fourth largest broker now out there. In the visibility arena, the 10.4 offering, which was one of the original visibility platforms, that was also Andrew's startup when he was doing that. And I think you'll see how what he's pursuing now plays through that. And what Andrew's always seen is consistent with what I've seen. You'll know that I say that I've been chasing optimality in freight procurement for about 20 years or so. Why would one do that? There's $800 billion out there. $400 billion of it is available for many of us to provide technology to support or provide supply and or demand within that. And so that brings me to Andrew. Let's start with that. All of that being the platform, what was your vision for Emerge in that context?
Yeah, thanks, George. Before I get into that, I just want to thank FreightWaves for hosting this event and also shining a light on this industry. Before FreightWaves, everybody was kind of in the dark in this industry, and now with FreightWaves and what Craig Fuller's done, investors are finally coming in this industry, shining a light on companies. You know, when I first started Global Trans in 2003, it took me 8 years to get my first investment check, and I had to get to 100 million in revenue. Mm-hmm. And once I got to 100 million in revenue, we finally got our first investment check. We're one of the few companies that got investors back in 2011. And now it seems like if you could have the idea of a freight tech idea, post an article on FreightWaves, you don't really need any, just there you go, watch the money come in. And also I gotta say, how amazing is that FreightWaves, the power that this company has now with the fact that just last week, the article came out, the freight recession. I think that pretty much sunk the entire stock market. So that's definite power. Also, thank you for letting George come to Emerge. But yeah, just about Emerge. So the reason that I started this company was when I first got into the business, I noticed when I first got into truckload at Global Trans, I asked one of the sales reps at Global Trans. I said, "How did we win? We just won a bid from a truckload shipper." And I said, "How did we win this bid?" And he goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, show me the process of how we won this freight." And he said, he showed me his computer and he showed me an Excel spreadsheet. And I said, "This is a top 10 shipper." And I said, "This is what the shipper does for their bid?" He goes, "Yeah, they blast it to 20 or 30 carriers and brokers, and we're one of them. And we put our rates inside the Excel spreadsheet, and then we email it back to them, and they combine it, and they do their awarding that way." And that's when I was like, oh my God, this is the technology that shippers use to procure freight. And that's what brought me to come up with the idea for Emerge, because I was like, there's no one focusing on procurement. And that is, the TMSs are an execution layer. Every big shipper has a TMS. I don't recommend starting a TMS company because no big shipper's ever gonna rip out their old looking TMS. It's just too hard. But they all have a TMS, but that's how you execute your freight. But if you ask any shipper, how do you go out, get your carriers, find new carriers, award the carriers, and execute your bid, it just doesn't exist. As a matter of fact, there's two companies that do it, but they're not really focused on freight, and they're focused on all purchasing. So that's where the idea of Emerge came from. And 80% of the trucks that you see on the road are contracted freight right now. It was like a month ago, 70%. Now it's moving back up to more contract since now there's less freight out there, so less spot movements. But it historically has always been 10% spot and 90% contract. And the TMSs have always been the execution layer, and that's what Emerge is doing. We're trying to build the best platform for procurement and giving that to the shippers, and that's where the idea for Emerge came from.
So as you think about procurement, it's a pretty broad phrase. I think I've heard it said that every shipment or everything starts with an RFP. How does that play itself into what you're thinking about or how it came about from Global Trans?
Yeah, so that is true. And that's what the topic of this conversation is. All freight does start with an RFP. An RFP, a request for pricing, some shippers call it an RFQ, is what they do to obtain their rates from their carriers and brokers. And this works for all modes. And all freight does start with, even a shipper that sends out, a small mid-sized shipper that sends out 5 quotes a day and emails it to them, that's a request for pricing. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're focusing on because no one's really ever built anything. And again, the TMSs have done a really poor job of it. And they have a module for procurement, but no one really uses it. Mm-hmm. And so our goal at Emerge is to tie into the TMS and then allow the shippers to execute and create their route guides through our platform inside their TMS.
Got it. So as I described, I've been chasing optimality. That's the reason I'm as intrigued by everything that you've been pursuing. So the market, as you described, the influence FreightWaves has, the market's very volatile right now. Does that change the way that not just shippers, but that everybody should be thinking about what they do in procurement? What kind of opportunity does that provide where volatility has become, and if you're playing bingo, new normal, newer normal, and newest normal have already been taken. So we're in that newer normal where volatility is key. What does that say to best practices?
Yeah, so actually I'm going to plug FreightWaves here because I don't want an article written about me, but FreightWaves has a great product called Sonar, which is a benchmarking tool. There's also DAT out there, and I really think that actually freight does start the RFP, but the first part of running a successful RFP for a shipper is benchmarking. Why run a bid if you're paying rates lower than the industry? Mm-hmm. So you want to benchmark all your rates first. Sonar is a great product for that. So but then once you benchmark your rates, you then want to figure out. There was one of the top 10 shippers this year decided to do instead of which has always been a historical 1-year annual bid for 80% of their 80 to 90% of their freight volume. They decided to do a 6-month bid, which makes sense because, right, why lock in a rate today if in 6 months it's going to be better? And that I really think that it needs to be taken one step further than that. I think that shippers should start running 3, 6, and 12-month bids. And if you see, for instance, if you're paying lower rates than the industry, and why wait 3 months, 6 months, run a 12-month bid? Or if rates are dropping dramatically, run a 3-month bid because in 3 months you're going to get a much better deal. And then in 6 months if you see rates are staying steady, and then but it could be going down, and that's where right now that's what's happening. Freight rates are going down.
So those are signals. So how do I as a shipper, how do I determine how to do that? What kind of data? Where's the data coming from that would give me that ability to determine should I bid? If I'm going to bid, how long should I bid for? How much of my freight? Where's that data coming from?
Well, typically it comes from their TMS.
Okay.
And then you could upload it to Sonar. And then really that's what you should be doing. And you should be doing this on a daily. If you're a big, large shipper, top 10, 20, you got to be doing this on a daily basis or weekly basis, really seeing where your lanes are at. Because obviously if loads are going to the spot market, it's never a good thing, even though spot right now is actually doing better than contract, and that's why a lot of shippers are trying to redo their bids right now because it's actually gone a little lower than.
Right.
But really just tying that to your benchmarking and then running your bid is really the process that you should be thinking about.
So now you use the word benchmarking. as you're talking to shippers, how many of them, from a best practice standpoint, are you seeing are already benchmarking, or is that a greenfield? Is that really available?
It's actually, I would say half the large shippers are doing it.
Okay.
And none of the small shippers. I mean, no one does that. Most small shippers don't have contract freight. Mid-sized shippers do, but none of them really use benchmarking. It's mostly the largest companies, but with the investment going into like companies like Sonar, what we're doing, you got to really start thinking about, it's actually making it easier for shippers to start, all shippers to do it.
Right, right. So you've talked a lot about shippers. Many folks here are working with intermediaries. They are intermediaries, brokers. You've built one of the largest brokers out there. As the market is as it is today, and we think about what the newest normal is going to be, what would you say to, we've talked about shippers, what would you say to intermediaries and to carriers they should be looking at within their networks, and as they're receiving these bids that are probably going to be coming more often, more with a variability to the length of time? How should an intermediary and a carrier be thinking about it right now?
Well, I'm glad to see a lot of brokers here, because I see this because we have a spot market at Emerge, which brokers do tie into. And I see some brokers quoting a shipper 50 or 60 times. They don't have a digital rate like some of the digital brokers to win one load. And I don't think they even look at that as a cost. How many times do I have to quote this shipper to get one load? And for carriers, try to lock in your rates long term right now. You want a long term rate because rates are dropping. Brokers, the same thing. Mm-hmm. This is the time you want to take that risk, buy the lane, and then you're taking the risk that it's going to be obviously lower in 3 months, 6 months. This is a good time to take that risk, maybe going at cost, if you have a little bit of investor dough behind you. A lot of these guys do. But you want to go in, you want to lock in your rate for a longer term. And for shippers, it's different. Shippers, you should be thinking about, again, 3 shorter term bids, running more bids, be more agile with your bidding, and then doing it. And I've noticed this, actually, when I first started Emerge 3 years ago in 2019, before all the volatility happened, we couldn't get a shipper to talk to us. They'd be like, oh, we're good with our 20 carriers. And one thing that I've noticed, and everybody in this room can attest to, is that no shipper's ever said, I want to add more carriers. They just don't do that. It's like, but then you ask them,
unless it's a necessity. I mean, it's a bad market or whatever. You're right.
Right.
Absolutely.
They never say, oh, I want to add more carriers. They always want to whittle their carriers down to nothing.
Yep.
And there's 70,000 for hire trucking companies in the United States, and you're limiting the amount of carriers. And then you're asking them, oh, you want to lower your rates, or you want to keep the rates lower? Of course we do. Well, it's just counterintuitive.
Absolutely.
So adding more carriers and running shorter bid cycles and running a lot more bids. And just thinking about it in, with the benchmarking and being better about procurement.
So let me wrap this up a little bit. I mentioned $800 billion in the market. $400 billion is essentially available to the general carrier public. So where's Emerge today? Where do you expect it to be within, I don't know, between now and the end of this year? And when does that number allow for Emerge to have the kind of influence in the market that you believe that it could have?
Yeah, so right now we have, like you said, we're $20 billion flowing through our platform of the $800 billion a truckload. So our goal is to get, we give out a free RFP platform to get as many shippers on this platform as possible, because we believe that there's going to be so many synergies once we start getting the data, and we can start seeing like trucks moving and bringing carriers to bids that they weren't part of before. So, and then allowing carriers to add shippers to think about carriers and brokers in a different manner, where you should be adding as many capacity partners as you can. Before, you wouldn't want to add many brokers because, and actually I noticed this, the shippers that have more brokers pay the least amount on their spot market. It's just how it is. When you have at least 20 brokers quoting, tying in your digital brokers and everything else, it's better, even though you're trying to always say no to that.
Right.
Because the industry's still dark, the capacity's still dark, and whereas one broker, there might be a situation that happens every day where the broker that moved that load is only the carrier and that broker know that carrier is in a certain market on that day.
Yep.
So that's still how the industry works. So you want to be able to add as many partners as you can.
That's great. Well, we are coming to the end now. Andrew Leto, thank you for doing this. This was really a great pleasure.
Thanks,
and I want to say at the end here, transparency was the name of the game when FreightWaves started these things. A big shout out to Craig and the entire team for putting this on, and thanks for the opportunity this morning. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, man.
Well done.